You won't want to miss the pulse-pounding, pants-wetting excitement that can only be fueled when a half-man, half-badger, three-quarters ostrich space beast comes face-to-face with Arnold P. Thrimp of 42 Basildon Terrace, unknowingly one day when Throg, leader of all the cheese peoples, misplaces his retirement nickel-plated Venusian penknife under a copy of What Foreskin, a collection of Jewish bon mots in the Tittlemouth public lavatory. On a rainy afternoon, while visiting Earth to return a chisel he borrowed from Alan, his sometime chiropodist and golfing buddy. You'll howl in delirium and plead to go round a second time when you witness Gladys Knight and the Pips recreated from bits of old vacuum cleaner and CGI trickery as they defend the planet Jupiter from an invading horde of genetically bred and violently cloned Ryan Goslings who have been travelling the galaxy looking for even bigger windows to stare out of in a tight t-shirt while looking kind of vacant and twatty. As most of the windows in the universe have been boarded up due to the routine exploding of pigs due to hormone-enhanced Eric Stoltz, their quest has proved fruitless, and so hell-bent on wanton destruction, will a soothing yet up-tempo blend of rhythm and blues quash the bland uprising, or only enrage them further? And gasp in apoplectic splendor as an 80-foot Judi Dench wrestles Mechagodzilla for use of the intergalactic remote control as he has had the sky-projecting TV pods on women's double tennis for the last 4 years, while President Morgan Freeman robot leads the surviving members of the cast of What's Up the Neighbor and the resurrected ghost of Hervé Villachez in a rounding and tuneless rendition of the old toe-tapping classic Piano Man by Billy Joel, himself something of a messianic figure after early wax recordings of him banging his knees were dug up from the wreckage of the old world and transmitted through the 40 realms on the super information highway. All this and why the fuck can't you flabby-faced buffoons shut the arse up and we all just get along? Our intimate portrait of politicians, especially from Indiana and Arizona, coming up after this week's episode of the After Movie Diner. I'm sorry, due to a recent bill passed protecting religious freedoms, I have to ask that no clean-shaven people listen to this next broadcast. It's my right as a worshipper at the altar of the almighty beard. All hail Brian Blessed! Stop coming around after that. Probably because I shot him in the cock. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the After Movie Diner, and it is my absolute thrill and pleasure and honour to be here for yet another week. If you wish to write in to the After Movie Diner or send us a voicemail, don't forget you can do so at aftermoviediner@gmail.com or send voicemails to speakpipe.com/aftermoviediner or to our very own telephone number 347-669-0053. That's 347-669-0053. You can also, if you love the show and you wish to show your appreciation, you can sponsor us over at patreon.com/aftermoviediner. Oh yeah, 'cause Disney's got enough of your money. Disney's got enough of your money. Disney's got enough of your money. Why don't you support indie? Disney's got enough of your money. Yeah, Disney's got enough of your money. Everyone should support indie. They'd really appreciate it much more than Disney. Much more than Disney. They'd really appreciate it much more than Disney. Support indie. That's independent and not Indiana. All right, and in a new section that I'm calling Disney's Already Got Enough of Your Money, why don't you give it to some independent people? I'm going to be giving a shout-out this week to 3 fantastic good friends of mine and great authors in their own right. That's Tim Gross, Jon Wallace, who's the co-host of this very show you're about to listen to, and Abby Denson. Each one of them has written an absolutely fantastic book that you should all rush out and pick up right now. Tim Gross's book, which is a book of movie reviews, which should be right up the alley of anyone listening to this show. He's the co-host of Bloodbaths and Boomsticks, if anyone's heard any of my guest spots over there. It's Tim Gross. It's Gross Movie Reviews, The Wrath of Gross, by Tim Gross, and it's got a fantastic front cover by Ed Quillen. It's got pictures throughout, and it has got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of movie reviews from the most up-to-date, most recent stuff, all way down to the most B-movie and weird and wonderful stuff. It's absolutely fantastic. If you are into B-movies, if you are into rare movies, if you're into full moon movies, then this is the book for you. Tim Gross, it's Gross Movie Reviews, The Wrath of Gross, can be found right now for purchase over at lulu.com. That's lulu.com. Please go pick that up. Second book recommendation for this week is Barricade by none other than the upcoming co-host of this particular episode, Jon Wallace, and it's the sci-fi book that I've been talking about all year. My very good friend, who I've known since I was 6 years old, is now a published sci-fi author. Couldn't be more excited, couldn't be more honored to know the guy. It's absolutely fantastic, and his book is available on Amazon, either in ebook or paperback form, and you can pick that up. It ships very reasonably from the UK. I bought my copy and had it shipped in from the UK. Or indeed, if you're in the UK, then of course you can just walk into a bookshop and pick it up. The more people who do that, by the way, the more it will be available soon in the US. There is also a sequel coming, so look out for that. That's Barricade by Jon Wallace. It's available, as I said, on Amazon or at any bookshop in the UK. I know, for example, that the London branch of Forbidden Planet is definitely carrying it. And last but not least, Abby Denson wrote and drew an absolutely fantastic book called Cool Japan Guide, Fun in the Land of Manga, Lucky Cats, and Ramen. It's an absolutely fantastic book. It's a guidebook and a help book if you are thinking of traveling to Japan, or if you just want to learn about Japan, or if you're just interested in Japanese stuff. But it's all drawn like a graphic novel, and it's absolutely fantastic. Follow Abby's adventures throughout Japan and find out all about that fantastic country. Whether you're visiting it or not, it's well worth picking up, and that is in bookshops across the US right now. And it's available on Amazon, online, in Kindle form, and also in paperback form. So if you wish to pick that up, please go over to Amazon. Check out Abby's work. She's written for Spider-Man and all sorts of comic books. She's a great author. Check that out. So we've got Jon Wallace with Barricade, Tim Gross with Gross Movie Reviews, The Wrath of Gross, and Abby Denson with Cool Japan Guide, Fun in the Land of Manga, Lucky Cats, and Ramen. 3 books. Disney's got enough of your fucking money, so don't give any more to them. Go out, buy this stuff, support indie, support indie, support indie, because that is the only way the future is going to be built, ladies and gentlemen, to support indie stuff. So go do it. Disney's got enough of your money. Disney's got enough of your money. Said it. Disney's got enough of your money. Why don't you support some indie? Disney's got enough of your money. Disney's got enough of your money. Disney's got enough of your money. Why don't you support indie stuff now? Alrighty then. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the After Movie Diner. And with me in the roughly hewn leatherette booth seats this week, it is returning champion, the Wonder of Wonders, published sci-fi author extraordinaire, best old chum, and just all-round good egg, Monsignor Jon Wallace. Say hello, sir.
Hello, hello.
And if he's back on the show, you know what that means. It means it's another helping of the pie that is Caine and Keaton. A slice for each, please. And what films are we covering this week of this insanity?
This week has, I have to say, been my favourite so far. We are covering Dream Team, and we are covering Blue Ice. And I say it like that because everything about this film was not what I was expecting.
Right.
In a brilliant, but or maybe exactly what I was expecting. I don't know. I don't know where to begin talking about Blue Ice, but we will at some point.
Should we do the Dream Team first? Should we go chronologically? Because the Dream Team came out in '89. Blue Ice was not until 1992.
Is that right? Yes. Yeah.
Or do we do Caine and Keaton like we've always done, which is Caine first and Keaton second?
Nah, let's go with the Dream Team. Let's do that first.
So, the Dream Team, this is a movie that, it's been with us a long old time, hasn't it? It was definitely one of our favourites growing up.
Yeah, it was one of those, it was definitely a trailers on the VHS, like, oh, that looks really good. It did have a brilliant trailer, really, really good trailer. Now, I have to admit that when I sat down to watch it, I kind of thought, I don't know about this, because believe it or not, I remember thinking like it was okay, the Dream Team, when I was sort of 12 or 13 or whatever, I remember thinking of it as okay and not that great. But watching it again, actually, I enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to. I mean, it was a lot funnier than I expected, and I think maybe I don't know. Maybe it was my attention span at that age or something. I don't know, but it was really, really good. It was really good.
Well, a lot of I mean, it's not a teenage comedy. It's not like a frat house comedy. It's not even something that's sort of relatively understandable like The Burbs. It's one-liners and it's little like asides are far more kind of quippy and adult in that regard.
Yeah.
And some of the references, certainly like a lot of the sort of biblical stuff that Peter Boyle is going on about, and even some of the stuff that Keaton is talking about in his, hallucinations or his fantasies or whatever. A lot of those are sort of stuff that I would only really know now rather than stuff that I would have known 20 years ago. Like 20 years ago, it was all about, some goofy caper in New York City, a bunch of escaped but harmless, wacky lunatics kind of bumble around New York. But now you've got a bigger appreciation of it because of the incredible one-liners that are throughout. And, for me, this is up there with The Burbs, as if everyone talks about Michael Keaton's 80s comedy output, most people will mention Night Shift and maybe sort of Gung Ho and Mr. Mom and things like that. Whereas for me, it was always The Dream Team. Just like when people talk about Tom Hanks, they talk about, Big or Splash or whatever. For me, it was always The Burbs. So,
yeah, no, it's the same here. I mean, I wouldn't have known any of those other movies. I mean, any of them.
Right.
The only Keaton movies I know, before we started off on this journey, the only Keaton movies that meant anything to me were Beetlejuice, The Dream Team, weirdly enough, Multiplicity, and
right.
I think because they sold that so hard. Multiplicity was sold really hard, presumably because they realised it wasn't very good.
Well, Batman, of course.
And Batman, yeah, exactly. But all those other comedy stuff didn't register with me at all. Yeah,
and he's hardly in Beetlejuice, actually, when you go back. It's one of those famous things where his name is in the title and everyone thinks he's in it all the way through, but he has about 10 or 15 minutes of screen time or something.
Yeah, but just absolutely steals the show.
Oh, yeah, no, completely and utterly. But it's basically, the movie is basically a comedic version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to some extent. It certainly owes a big debt to that film.
Yes.
And there was a couple of
Christopher Lloyd to start with.
Right, Christopher Lloyd. But there was also like a bunch of other stuff, like, for example, The Couch Trip with Dan Aykroyd was another one where they were like, what if a lunatic escaped asylum and became a psychologist,
Yeah.
But in this one, the convoluted narrative is that they're all being taken out of their home for a day trip to Yankee Stadium to see the Yankees play baseball. And along the way, they pull over at a gas station in lower Manhattan, and their doctor takes, is it Alfred? The baseball-obsessed guy who's played by the guy from Animal House. Albert, that's it. Sorry, it's Albert, who's played by, remind me the name?
Stephen Furst.
Stephen Furst, who was famous from Animal House, is playing Flounder. And he goes into an alleyway to take a pee, and his doctor goes with him, and his doctor hears a kerfuffle in a room at the end of the alleyway, only to witness a murder by two crooked cops, who then knock him out and beat him up. He then gets taken off to the hospital, and because Albert doesn't speak, except in baseball terms, when he goes back to the van, they all sit there till nightfall. Their doctor's been taken away with concussion to the hospital. They don't know where he is, and eventually each one of them decides to leave the van and have a night out on the town.
Exactly, and it's an interesting one because when I went to when I'm stuck on the movie, I went and had a look at the writers, and both the writers and the director really haven't got much on their CV. I mean, not much at all. There's so the writers, John Connolly and David Luca, which is one of those brilliant American names that I wish I had, Luca. who has done really not very much at all. House at the End of the Street, the 2012 one. Yeah. Produced The Dream Team as well. Then there's like, this is IMDb. And then there's John Connolly is another writer of it who has very little on his CV as well, barely a thing. And then the director, and it's very sort of workmanlike direction from Howard Zieff, who has done things like Private Benjamin and a 1973 movie called Slither. So not the one that I like, one with James Caan. Really quite random things coming together to make this movie. But so I was immediately curious. I mean, I'd love to know how it is that this project gets sort of very average sort of writer-director team behind it and then gets such a great cast. The cast is just brilliant, isn't it? I mean, it's such a great ensemble. Got Michael Keaton, Christopher Lloyd, and Peter Boyle as three main people in it, with Stephen Furst as a sort of mute person who can only communicate through baseball. And they are just, I mean, that is such a great trio to put together. I suppose, really, saying that out loud, I realised that actually to a Hollywood producer, those names aren't that big. But to you or me, these are massive names, aren't they?
Well, they're all. The weird thing is Keaton. Keaton is a sidekick guy from all his earlier movies, except maybe like Gung Ho, maybe in Mr. Mom. But like, he's a sidekick in Night Shift. I think he's a sidekick in Johnny Dangerously. I forget. He's a sidekick in Beetlejuice. Even in Batman, he's a sidekick to Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
Obviously Christopher Lloyd is famous for Doc Brown, which is sort of a sidekick to Michael J. Fox. Stephen Furst is a sidekick to Tom Hulce in Animal House. And Peter Boyle is sort of one of the Mel Brooks set, isn't he? Sort of just a bit player in the Mel Brooks group. And a sort of sidekick in Taxi Driver, of course, where he plays the amazing wizard character, which I've always loved him in that as well. So they are kind of, I mean, just like they're meant to be mismatched, misfit patients, they are sort of a mismatched, misfit, group of actors to some extent. But I love it. And they've each got these defined roles that allows them to have lots and lots of fun with lots of different areas of comedy. You've got Michael Keaton, who's sort of the con man who has fantasies, who kind of can wisecrack his way out of any situation. You have Christopher Lloyd, who believes himself to be a doctor, so everything is sort of medical terms, and but he believes that he's also OCD and has to like pick up rubbish everywhere he goes.
He loves the formality, and the cleanliness and the order of the sort of the institution. He loves that and sort of submerges himself in there. And Keaton has this compulsive liar thing, which is just so lovable, that his compulsive lies he comes up with because of his delivery. Because this is the thing that's most pleasing about it to me, is Michael Keaton getting the proper leading role, and it's really good for him as well, because a combination of those eyebrows and that sort of really intense delivery is perfect for a compulsive liar. Because he's so but they all believe him when he says these like completely outrageous howlers. Right. They believe him because of his really intense delivery. And the other thing about it, which was such a joy, because I always knew Christopher Lloyd was good, but I'd forgotten how good Peter Boyle is. And Peter Boyle is easily the funniest thing in it. Actually,
he's so good.
Yeah.
When he says, what does he say about when he gets out of the van? He says, "I am the Lord thy God; thou shalt have no strange gods before me." Out of my way, asshole. And the other bit where they're in the group at the beginning, where he goes, "Can we get another vote on Henry's lobotomy?" like that, and he's like, "We had you 3-2," like that, and he goes like that. So good. Michael Keaton's so good in it.
But that's the thing is so the reasons to watch it is these trio performances. Actually, also Lorraine Bracco is in it as just being like a really sort of spunky ex-girlfriend of Michael Keaton's, but she's brilliant. I love Lorraine Bracco.
Yeah.
But Peter Boyle has the same joke, basically, he's doing the entire way through the film in 50 different ways, and it just keeps on being funny. So basically, Peter Boyle believes that he is Christ, and so he's doing these jokes the entire way through. Like, who dares to tow the van of the living Christ? They're towing the van away. So who dares to tow the van of the living Christ? And also, I loved it. There's this brilliant bit where, so Lorraine Bracco is Michael Keaton's ex, and they go along to the ex's flat in search of help because, obviously, after the doctors got involved with the bent cops, that they get tangled up with the bent cops and everything.
Right.
And they wind up
because they're wanted for murder. They think they
get wanted for murder. And Boyle is there, and Lorraine Bracco's new boyfriend is there, and he's got this sculpture. And Boyle, who used to be in like a yuppie trader,
he was in advertising.
Knows how to do all of this talk. So he goes up to this sculpture and goes, "Wow, this is a brilliant evocation of negative space." And the guy says, "Oh, you really know your stuff." And goes, "Yeah, you know why it's a brilliant evocation of negative space? Because Jesus wants it that way." Sticks his face right, and he's got this brilliant manic expression, and it was fantastic. Like, I kept laughing the whole way through, and I was really surprised because I'd clearly forgotten how good he is.
And that amazing bit where they're in the van at the beginning driving to New York and they all sing Hit the Road Jack, with Christopher Lloyd being utterly charming, trying to like let go but not. He does this amazing thing where he's so repressed and tight and like likes order and everything, but the music's like just getting to him. It's so... Yeah. It's
and
such
Boyle kicks
subtle
in with the high screaming, oh woman, don't you
well, yeah, because Boyle, if anything, is the most like relaxed and comfortable with his, insanity.
Yeah, he's really happy with it. Yeah.
Because the Jesus fixation just allows him to wander through the world. There's even obvious jokes. Where he walks past the guy in the hospital and he's like, "Arise and walk, my son," and the guy gets up off the gurney and falls over.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I've got a whole list, like half of my notes here actually are lists of Peter Boyle lines, but I can't read them out because they're really, really good, and no one can deliver him like he can. You have to watch the movie. It's like he has the most impressive thing about it, because a lot of the time when you watch a movie like this, doesn't it? What happens is, there's a really good idea and the joke works like 5 or 6 times and then it kind of fades away and gets eaten away by the story and disappears. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas this, it's consistent the whole way through, like gag. It keeps on coming the whole way through the film and you don't really get tired of it. It's really, really good. And it's the same with all 3 of them. All the comedy that comes from all 3 of their performances just keeps on coming and it doesn't get... Because the story is so light, basically... they don't have to lose it while they deal with the like labyrinthine plot. It keeps on going, and so it's a really nice knockabout 80s comedy. I mean, one thing I will say, the mark of a good movie for me, especially a comedy movie, is when and a great script as well, is when the script gives space to even the smallest part to have a good joke. And there's a really good bit where Keaton is, after they've been arrested, Keaton is like having his fingerprints taken. He's trying to persuade the cops that he's a perfectly sane person. They should listen to him. He says, look, look, I don't talk to my dog. I don't think I'm Elvis. I don't put on a dress and dance around. And the cop says, impressive credentials. It's like, that's a really good line. Right. And it's just one cop. He's got no other bit in the whole rest of the film. And they gave him a really nice line. I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know because, like I say, I don't know the history of the making of the film, and I was just quickly scrolling through trivia on IMDb to see if there was anything. But it just sounds like it was just a standard sort of Hollywood comedy script that was knocking about, and they just put it into production, cast it the way they would normally. I wonder how much of it is, improv and how much of it was actually scripted. But I mean, I think you're right. I think it's got a very strong opening, and it doesn't really have any dips or lulls for me in terms of the comedy. But my favourite bits are still the opening, like the group meeting that they hold at the beginning, where Keaton throws the chair into the window, And he's like, maybe all the other... No, when he sits down and he pushes his chair out of the order and he says, order that chair. And he goes, maybe all the other chairs are out of order. You ever think of that, pal? Like that. And, and all those kind of lines. I love all that stuff. It's brilliant. And then when Christopher Lloyd is reassociated with his wife and child at one point, it's genuinely emotionally affecting. Like, it's really... It's like a real moment in the movie because you... The good thing about 80s comedies was in something like this, it's a movie that couldn't exist if you were too politically correct because they are all mental patients, right? They are all in an institution for a reason. But they're all so charming and they're all so funny and it's such a sort of knockabout caper that you immediately kind of go with it and you kind of become very... enamored with them, and you know, you do side with them, and you do, you know, you do think of them as, you know, and New York's a perfect place to set it in the 80s because it's this idea that New York is just this sprawling mass of crazy, and that actually who would notice four of these people, you know, doing their bonkers stuff in and around it. So, but when it does come to either Billy's love story or Christopher Lloyd with his wife and child, and even Albert and his little, like, sort of, you know, when Albert finally speaks and stuff, it is sort of affecting, you know what I mean? And then, you know, Peter Boyle is against sort of the corporate greed and everything. You kind of, like, you rally for that as well. It's brilliant.
Yeah. No, you're right. I doubt it would... I mean, who knows? But, you know, it feels very much of its time because it has... I mean, it has... one of the things another thing which is brilliant about it is the music that plays, like, they actually play Walk the Dinosaur. And it's like, I saw on Facebook someone wrote underneath it Walk the Dinosaur, and I thought, they don't play why would they play Walk the Dinosaur? What's that got to do with anything? No, they just sling it in there. It's played.
That's when they pull into New York. When they pull into New York, it's
and they also play
Chaka-laka-laka boom. It's brilliant. I love that song.
Yeah, and there's loads of sax and all the rest of it. And so it's super, super late 80s. I think the thing that I forgot, the thing that sort of brought a glow to me when I saw it was, which again, it was this bit that I'd forgotten about that is so funny, is Christopher Lloyd, who you find out at the very end of the film, his actual job as he worked for the sanitation department.
Yeah.
You don't know this at the beginning, this bit of the film where he's walking on, just as he's finally left the van, he's just wandering the streets like he is actually an escaped lunatic, and he sees, and he's obsessive about mess and rubbish, and he sees these people throwing away the garbage, and he makes this kind of orgasmic, excited noise. He goes like, and runs up to him and starts picking up the garbage. And the way he tosses the garbage into the back of that van is one of the most brilliant physical comedy things like he's ever done, and it's just fantastic.
Well, it's something to be said for casting, and we had this feeling with Weller and Woods as well, in the sense that no one coming up now like Weller and Woods in the 80s would ever be a leading man. They would only ever be a character actor. And we have this situation with 80s comedies versus now. 80s comedy, certainly something like The Dream Team, it's cast with a bunch of either leading actors and or character actors just doing these really great performances and actually like filling out a character. Whereas now, comedy movies are comedy movies. In other words, here is the box and we're putting them in and here's comedy movies. And you either have the Will Ferrell, Adam McKay stuff, or you have the Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen, you know, that stuff. Or you have the Saturday Night Live stuff. Like, that's all you're getting. They would never do a comedy these days where they kind of cast someone a little left field or a little odd. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes, do you know what? Instinctively, I agree with you, but I do sometimes wonder if maybe I'm just a bit out of touch. I don't know, but I mean, I said to Hamble recently, like, you know, when was the last time we saw a comedy at the cinema? You know, when was the last time we saw one? You know, and the one I always remember, the one that made me think like, that's it, I'm not going to see comedies anymore, like at the cinema, like new comedies, was Horrible Bosses,
which was the first ever episode we did.
Was it really? Right. And I just, well, that shows you how long ago it was. And I just thought, like, because I went to see it on the basis of Jason Bateman, who I loved in Arrested Development, and it was just awful. It was just awful. And since then, I don't think I've been to see a single comedy. But then I feel like there isn't anything really coming out. You know, like I don't feel there's like an impressive. The last group of people doing comedy that I thought did some impressive stuff, and it was only a short blurt of stuff, was like that crossover of like Stiller, Ferrell, you know, like those sort of little movies that really didn't do a huge amount when they actually came out.
Zoolander, Anchorman, and
yeah, all that stuff. Now maybe that shows my age, and actually there's been some really good stuff since then. I don't know, but I can't think of what it is.
Do you know who's making comedies and casting interesting people that aren't just comedians? And that's Wes Anderson, in a way, because he doesn't cast comedians. He casts, you know, I mean, yes, he cast Bill Murray.
That's true.
But he casts Bruce Willis and Edward Norton and Harvey Keitel and, you know, Ralph Fiennes just gave a great performance in Grand Budapest. And who else did he cast? Well, you know, like Gene Hackman, you know, Angelica Houston, like these people, Danny Glover. I mean, Danny Glover's hilarious in Royal Tenenbaums. And you've never really seen him do stuff like that before. So that's what I mean. It's like no one is casting movies like that apart from maybe Wes Anderson. And I'm telling you, because I see a lot of comedies and I watch a lot of comedies, and it's either... Yeah, it's either Will Ferrell or it's Seth Rogen or it's Ben Stiller or it's the same old people is what I'm saying. And they're comedians who are known for comedy being cast in comic films. Whereas this is, yeah, okay, Michael Keaton was known for doing comical performances, but he was also known as an actor. I mean, he would follow this up with Pacific Heights, which of course is not a comedic role at all. And Christopher Lloyd is another one who's danced between comedy and drama his whole career. And Peter Boyle is another one, like I say, famous for Taxi Driver, but also famous for Young Frankenstein. Like they're all people who are more. They're like Woods and Weller. They're like diverse character actors.
That's the thing, actually. That's a connection, isn't it? Because that is one of the weirdest Gene Hackman roles ever, and it's absolute comic gold. Is when he's the blind man and Peter Boyle is there and he's pouring the soup over his hands and stuff like that. It's just really good. That scene. I love that.
But do you know what I mean? Like, we're not having... Who are the character actors now that you could see cast in a funny film that aren't being cast in funny...
Well, I think there's... I mean, I think, you know, I think Clooney has shown that he can actually be really funny in, like, you know, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah, okay, I suppose the Coens are doing it. Okay, maybe sort of these odd little fringe director groups are doing it. But, I mean... It's not the same. This is not like a fringe art house comedy. The Dream Team is a balls out, you know, nut jobs in New York, wacky, have a go 80s comedy that's cast this way. It's not like Raising Arizona, which was the Coen brothers casting Nick Cage and Holly Hunter but making a wacky comedy. This is made as a full blown. There's no art house about this at all. So I mean, apart from maybe it's cuckoo pretensions, but. Even that is slight, if anything at all.
Oh, yeah, very slight, yeah.
So that's what I mean, is I'm just saying that the Dream Team for me, along with sort of Hanks doing comedy in The Burbs and Dragnet and then and Woods and Weller stuff and things like that's what I mean. It's just that there seemed to be a moment in time where everything was just more inventive. Marketing was more inventive. Casting directors were more inventive. The scripts seemed to be the script seemed to have had a rewrite. Not everything was improvised. Do you know what I mean? Like things just seemed more packaged.
I think they had a bit. I think that's probably fair to say. I think it definitely feels, doesn't it, like there's less freedom to sort of take time over things and get them right and do things the way the artistic people want to do them as opposed to the way the business wants to do them. It does feel like it's sort of gone through a period of retrenchment. But I don't. But again, I'm always cautious about saying this stuff because I'm just conscious that I'm now 35 years old and that perhaps my finger is not exactly on the pulse, you know. Right. So you know, after all, we're talking about Michael Keaton. But I mean, I think the important thing to say about Dream Team is that half the reason why I enjoyed it so much, apart from how brilliant it was, is that it's a Michael Keaton film, and I don't know how many of these there are going to be in this series where he's the proper lead, like he is the undisputed lead. He's got a really good script to get his teeth into, which completely suits his strongest suits as an actor. And he carries it like totally effortlessly. Like he just carries the whole, he carries the movie absolutely brilliantly, links it all together. It totally like really likable, super charismatic performance, and it was just a real pleasure. It was like, I'm so glad the guy got a chance to really show what he can do, because just like we've said, a lot of films were sidekick, and a lot of films where he did get to be the main part, they didn't seem like the right fits for him. Like I really thought. I've only ever seen half of Multiplicity. I mean, we'll probably cover it. I don't know, but I remember thinking, like, man, this is not. I mean, I could be completely wrong on watching it again, but I remember thinking this just doesn't seem like Michael's film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. For the moment, I'd like to stay in the 80s. I'd like to do Gung Ho, Johnny Dangerously, Mr. Mum. I'd like to do those ones at the moment.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Because they're a little weirder, and I'd be more interested to see his like early comedic weird stuff, really. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's plenty of Caine nonsense to deal with then as well.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. If you want to see great Michael Keaton, this is the movie to see, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to know why like Keaton is still revered by, because Keaton did that bit in The Other Guys, which was the Will Ferrell movie recently, and everyone talked about like, oh, Keaton's coming on set and, this is a big deal and he's a comedic genius and all the rest of it. If you want to see him, like, I think at the strength of his powers, or the height of his powers rather, it's definitely the Dream Team for me. It's the one I grew up with and it's the one I, still love to this day. And it's one of those that thankfully, like you said at the beginning, what we enjoyed about it in the 80s when we were kids, or in the 90s growing up, is now different to why we enjoy it now. You know what I mean? We're getting the one-liners now, we're getting the references now, we're getting a bit more of the emotional beats now that we weren't back then. So I love movies that change as you get older but still stay as good, you know what I mean? And we had the same experience in a really weird way with the A-Team. We both loved it as a kid, but then when we watched it, you were like, really? You're going to sit down and watch the A-Team? This was in our flat in London. And I was like, yeah, the A-Team's awesome. And you were like, okay, fair enough, I'll give it a go. And we put it on, and what you realised it's like writing for the characters over time. They were actually doing some really fun things with Murdoch and Hannibal and stuff like that. That you appreciated now as an adult with the writing versus as a kid, you just loved seeing them run around and play silly or whatever.
Oh, that's all the guns. Yeah.
Right. So that's how I feel about it, and that's always a good thing. Can't recommend the Dream Team too much. If you haven't seen it, or if you don't know what we're talking about, go out and watch it. It's mucho 80s, good time, fun, with a lot of sax, silly costumes, and a bit of emotional twangage in there just for good measure.
Absolutely. And the second film, if it can be called a film, and I'm really stunned by this movie, is Blue Ice, which you are saying is from when? 1992?
Yes.
Right. Do you want to explain Blue Ice?
I'm not sure I can. Blue Ice is essentially Caine, in a way, trying to do another Harry Palmer film on his own without any source material, with a bunch of his mates thrown in for good measure. An Australian director and Russell Mulcahy, who we'll get onto in a minute, literally a Sharon Stone substitute in Sean Young, because Sharon Stone was originally pipped to be in this, if you can believe that. And it
is a appallingly written part.
The whole movie is appallingly written. The fact that literally,
in a kind of a mesmeric way.
Yeah, but literally in the last 5 minutes, Ian Holm has to tie the whole fucking thing up while they're running around the engine room of a ship. Because I was sat there watching the movie going, wait a minute. Halfway through, I actually had an epiphany where I was like, this makes like nothing that's happening makes any sense at all. So what they've done is they've given all the exposition to Ian Holm to like squeak at Michael Caine from the other end of an engine room in the last 5 minutes of the movie, which is bonkers way round of writing. So anyway, rather than playing Harry Palmer, he plays Harry Anders, who runs a jazz club in Soho in the red light district, with the piano player from Manhattan Murder Mystery and Hannah and Her Sisters, who has a standing thing at the Cafe Carlyle, which is Bobby Short, who does that "Why Can I, as lonely as a cloud," whatever it is. Anyway, you know that "I happen to like New York." He's got that really distinctive voice. So he's the pianist who is, you know, clearly modelled very haphazardly on Sam from Casablanca. Like, it's basically Rick and Sam from Casablanca. In the most convoluted car chase of all time, Michael Caine's ex-retired jazz-owning spy bumps into femme fatale Sean Young, which starts him on a uninspiring, misjudged, like, murder thriller in the streets of London.
Yeah. Basically what happens is Harry Anders, running the jazz club, he's ex-British military intelligence, but, you know, now he lives for jazz now and he runs his club and it's just ticking over. And literally the film hinges on him being his Flash Jaguar being rear-ended by Sean Young, and then he chases her in a kind of a like sexy chase kind of a way.
Except that it's not.
They
except
begin
that it's
a
at like
relationship.
30 miles an hour through some boring streets in London.
Yeah. And so they begin a relationship, and then it eventually turns out that she has been in another relationship with another person in military intelligence. So let's just think about that for a moment. She's in a relationship and is married to the American ambassador. So she's married to the American ambassador, she's having an affair with someone in American military intelligence, and she happens to rear-end someone who used to be in British military intelligence, which happens to coincide quite nicely in order to have, a military intelligence-based thing. And then it goes off into this big thriller where occasionally, they just parachute in a British actor of some description.
Michael Caine's friends, basically.
Michael Caine's mates. Like, get parachuted in, apropos of nothing.
Right.
Apart from, like, to have... I mean, we'll get onto the Bob Hoskins bit in a minute, because that's just unbelievable. But what you have to say about the film, and what has to be said about it, is that it is totally worth watching. And the reason why it's worth watching is, it's the closest a serious film gets to being The Naked Gun that I've ever seen. And it's quite remarkable, especially since The Naked Gun was coming out around this time, a little bit later or something.
Earlier, I think The Naked Gun's 89 or something. Because
the whole thing with like you say, it has that very Naked Gun thing of like where it takes bits and pieces of everything, and you know, like you say, there's a bit of Casablanca, there's a bit of Harry Palmer, you know, there's a bit of this, there's a bit of that. It's just thrown into this big soup and sort of spat at you with like a complete blancmange of like...
Bit of Basic Instinct.
Bit of Basic Instinct, bit of all that. It's all just like thrown up at you. And the effect is extremely comic sometimes, and not intentionally. No. Is it? I mean, when he first chases Sean Young, right? And this is where you said... You sent me a text saying she is basically playing her part from Fatal Instinct, which is, no one has ever seen it. That's totally worth seeing as well, which is basically a Naked Gun, but with some different people in it.
Well, it's a parody of all those... It's a parody of Fatal Attraction, Basic Instinct, Sliver, all those, like, erotic thrillers that came out in the 90s.
Yeah, and it's got some brilliant jokes in it.
Amanda Asante.
And I've always liked Sean Young because she's clearly got a fantastic sense of humour, because she's done a few of those sorts of roles. Like Ace Ventura and things like that.
And yet she's been considered as really problematic to work with.
Yeah. But in this, he chases her, and then when she gets out of the car, she's dressed like she's in Blade Runner, isn't she? I mean, she's got this like huge collared white thing and an incredibly short skirt and ridiculous makeup. And it makes you laugh just to see her getting out of the car. It's very much like the effect of like in a Naked Gun, where they're driving along in a car and the wind's in their hair, and then they get out and the hair is fixed in a wind-blown, like, sort of bouffant thing. It's very much that kind of effect. And there's loads of things that happen throughout the film that are like that make you howl with laughter because they're just going a bit too far. But it's remarkable because it's coming from a serious place. Right.
Completely. It's utterly bonkers. And then them like being in the jazz, because they basically meet, crash the car, go to the jazz club. Caine goes, "Oh yeah, I own a jazz club, blah 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 blah." She goes, "Oh my, you have moistened my pants with your jazz club talk." And then they bonk, right?
Yeah, he says...
Oh, no. He has her round for dinner the next day, and then they bonk.
Literally, the third line he says to her... I mean, the rate at which their relationship accelerates is just unbelievable.
Right. Also,
well,
you've got to...
Unbelievable is a key word of this film, really.
You've got to buy that Sean Young steps out of a car and within an instant looks at podgy, red-faced, one too many cognacs... Caine, and thinks this is the guy that I next want, humping and pumping me.
Well, I was going to say there was a bit in the film where, and it's happened in a couple of his other films as well, where you see you see Sean Young lying there, totally gorgeous, like half naked, and then the camera begins to pan. And you go, "Oh no! Don't let me see Michael Caine naked. Please don't let me see Michael Caine naked." And even just seeing his shoulders naked is deeply disturbing. And I don't know what. I think it's because he's got this you say, this sort of saggy, too many cognacs physicality, because all he does is smoke cigars and booze.
This was his prime.
This is not a Bruce Willis going to the gym and being buff. Hero.
This is prime. I'm hanging out with Michael Winner and Roger Moore and drinking and smoking way too much. You imagine he finished filming this one evening and then tottered off to Winner, and Winner goes, "Have you managed to get any tits in the picture, Michael?" Like that. You could just imagine that's the conversation they had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's utterly ridiculous. The love story is utterly ridiculous.
I mean, other Naked Gun moments, because I've got to talk to you a bit about some of these Naked Gun moments, and this is what I mean about. Well, there is again related to this relationship between, which is just beyond. Like I say, the key word to this film is unbelievable. If the film is just called Unbelievable, that would have explained it a lot better. There's this brilliant moment where they have a sex scene, and it's quite possible that Young was so repulsed to be having this this sort of pale sort of seal thrashing around on top of her that she was completely silent the entire way through. Because did you notice the horrendous dubbing of aroused moans that is put over that scene?
Oh yeah, the whole movie's full of
the dubbing is just abysmal, and it's so Naked Gun. It's really, really... Because the dubbing is just that bit too obvious that it makes you laugh, it properly does. And I kept on thinking, is this a joke? Is this a joke? But it's not a joke. It's definitely not. No, and a lot of that has got to do with the director, doesn't it? You were going to say about the director.
No, a lot of it has to do with Caine. Because I don't know why I think, but I thought Caine had more to do with this than just being an actor.
Oh, really?
I don't know why I thought that.
Well,
but anyway, because there's that bit in it where he's cooking for her, and I know that Caine has said in other interviews about Harry Palmer versus James Bond that a lot of studios were worried when Ipcress File comes out, and there's a scene in the Ipcress File for people who haven't seen it, which is the first of the Harry Palmer spy movies that Caine did, where he cooks for a lady, and back in the 60s, this was looked upon as quite effeminate and not masculine at all, and in fact it was Caine doing it in a suave way that actually made bachelors who could also cook and be charming and da as sort of a more masculine thing going into the late 60s, early 70s. But it was always looked at as, and he's always mentioned this in interviews, And so in this movie, there is basically that scene again, only he's sped it up. So he doesn't even get to finish cooking before she's derobed and is dragging him into the sack. But that's why I think that Caine had something more to do with this, because I don't know, I thought he produced it or something. I thought I'd heard in an interview that he said, a movie I did that I produced. I'm almost certain... But he doesn't seem listed on IMDb. Anyway, I've got a feeling that because Hostin shows up... Yeah, he's a producer. He is?
He is listed as a producer, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think he has a lot to do with this. And I think a lot of this is like Caine trying to say, I can make a good movie. And then everyone like steps back and looks at No,
so,
you can't. So the director thing, the Russell Mulcahy thing. Now, I love Russell Mulcahy from Razorback. He did an Australian movie called Razorback, which is about a giant boar in the outback terrorizing people. That is visually stunning in a really kind of Mad Max meets Terry Gilliam type way. Genuinely, there's some dream sequences in that movie that really harken to some of the stuff that Gilliam was doing in Time Bandits and things like that. And Russell Mulcahy's got this great kind of sense of it's almost very theatrical in the way that he lights stuff. He's almost like a Dario Argento in the fact that he lights stuff and films stuff in a very sort of theatrical, bombastic, over-the-top way. And although it's not on display in this movie all the way through, there are some absolutely what-the-fuck moments from, in the terms of direction, from the scene where they find the American guy she was having an affair with dead in the rundown hotel room, with the whole thing is done like Phantom of the Opera with fucking lightning in the sky and you know, everything's at a fucking Dutch angle and there's the dead bodies in the foreground and Caine is in the background silhouetted in the door. I mean, it's really, like, I love it. It's like my kind of direction because it's obvious and I like that. He was totally pulling out all the stops to just wring any interest out of this wet fish of a film that he was wrestling with. And then there's the amazing, this is another Harry Palmer throwback, where Caine is drugged to try and reveal what it is he knows about stuff to another British intelligence guy. And rather than in the Ipcress file, where it's a lot of sort of coloured lights on a shiny wall and someone over the top saying sort of very monotonous stuff with like a wow, like in the background, this sort of weird noise that's meant to disorientate him and stuff like that. In this, Mulcahy, it's almost like he's gone up to the Phantom of the Opera organ and literally pulled out every single fucking stop. I mean, there's a sequence in it where in the middle of this hallucinated like madness, Caine goes into a nightclub populated entirely by Michael Caines, which is sort of utterly bonkers. Like right down to like slamming... Michael Caine slams Michael Caine's hands in the piano lid and his hands shatter as if they were porcelain or whatever. There's all this incredible imagery and then it goes back to plod, tell this boring story. So like,
well, he's also because if you look at his filmography, this guy has also done like Duran Duran videos,
right? And Highlander,
also,
right? He did Highlander. Was the other
yeah. So you can imagine what he looks like. And actually, it's like I agree with you. I think I quite like his direction in a way.
Me too.
I do.
I would urge you to watch Razorback if you can get hold of a copy of Razorback.
He's undermined by this lazy, English whale with his cigars and stuff. He's like, he's undermined by this Naked Gun thing that keeps creeping in. Another Naked Gun thing that happens, which is just a pure delight, is Michael Caine's stunt double, who is basically doing at least half of this film. I mean, like half of this film.
Michael Caine running and leaping. Michael Caine running and leaping across the boat containers, at the Docklands in London I had me hooting because he might as well have just become a CGI Spider-Man for all it was worth.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, whenever he has to do more than breathe out, basically, the stunt double is brought in, and there are these wonderful moments where there's some bloke who's built like a brick shithouse wearing a Michael Caine wig, and he's jumping about British rail lines, and I was literally rolling about at some of those stunt double scenes because they're so Naked Gun.
Right.
But they're almost better than Naked Gun because they are genuinely intended to be serious.
Right. Yeah, you know that sequence in Naked Gun, it's one of the movies, I think, or maybe even the TV show, where Drebin does lots of, like, flips and spins and twists and then jumps down behind, like, a wall, and then Leslie Nielsen pops up, and it's very clear that it's a stunt double. Well, it's like that, but for real, you know?
Yeah. And, I mean,
do you know Ian Holmes' part was meant to be played by Denham Elliott?
That would have been even more completely bonkers than it is. Because, I mean, this film, and I don't mind saying it, because it's not a spoiler. The whole thing is just utterly bonkers. And you should think. But there is this... Well, maybe we shouldn't say, because it is such a treat at the end of the film. The end of the film is a real treat for the mix of genre and actor. The scene that is being given to certain actors to do is just so patently ridiculous that it's just an absolute laugh. I mean, it's tremendous laugh. But
imagine Die Hard 3 done on a tiny, tiny budget by people well over the hill, and you're slowly getting close to what we're talking about.
Yeah, well,
it's
they've emptied the local boozer and got people there to be filming an action movie. Basically, that's what it's like. All these sort of pale, knackered old men filming an action movie, and they are properly knackered. Like, they haven't got a muscle between them. All they've got is pot bellies and balding patches, And they've all been smoking and boozing the night away before every single scene. I mean, it's.
The one thing that I will give Sean Young, because I thought Sean Young was absolutely atrocious in the movie, and I thought that the script didn't do her any favours, but I don't think she did herself any favours.
She genuinely looks like... I thought she genuinely looked almost fucked off to be in it.
Yeah, of course she is. She's completely fucked off. They wanted Sharon Stone, and then when that fell through, they went...
But her
Sean
part
Young?
is properly, insulting to have to undertake, isn't it?
It's awful. It's utterly sexist and utterly without merit. I mean, it literally is. The movie is a bit like if you greased up young Sean Young and put her in a pit and then had a shirtless Caine, a shirtless Hoskins, a shirtless Ian Holm, and a shirtless Michael Winner, all rubbing themselves at her, you know what I mean?
That is what it's like. That's what it's like. I mean, it's such a debasing part in every respect. She has nothing to do but
it's what I was going to say.
Harry, and
I think the one thing that this movie gives to movie language that I've not seen in any other film, and the one thing that I really thought was very pleasing, and I can only assume, like you say, Sean Young got to the end of the script and was like, fuck this, right? This is meant to be like a strong woman role, and all I've done is been subservient to this couch potato who'd rather be in the, Oxford drinking men's club, yucking it up with his sexist fat mate. So there's one bit...
barely climb the stairs, let's be honest. Let alone jump shipping containers.
Shipping containers, right. So... Caine jumping shipping containers is genius. So... there's a bit at the end where the bad guy has got her, we've seen before, damsel in distress, got her around the neck and with a gun to her.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And instead of there being well, is he going to shoot him round the corner of her? Is he going to shoot through her? Is there going to be some big standoff? What's going to happen? She, kicks him in the leg or something and runs off and hides behind a container. So there's one moment where Sean Young has gone, look, I've been subservient to this... this blubbery mass for long enough. Let me at least show that this woman is capable of something, you know what I mean? And that was actually kind of pleasing because you've never seen that in a movie ever. When a woman gets, held hostage in a movie. That's what I thought.
But then she does immediately go back to going Harry and,
Right, and being incapable of shooting an enormous target with a tiny gun.
They back out of what could have half redeemed the sort of nightmare she's had to go through in terms of as an actress, is they give her an opportunity to like take the decisive shot with a pistol, and then they don't let her do it.
Right.
Which is really rubbish. And I would have happily seen her do it, because then it went on for like another 10 minutes. That was from the actual thing that happens at the end, which is just the way what happens to Ian Holm in that film. Wow, I did not see that coming. No. Wow.
Yeah, that was insane. But the other Naked Gun moment, which had me howling with laughter, was Caine taking the shooting test at Bob Hoskins' training ground. Yeah. That was unbelievable.
Well, the entire Hoskins sequence, because I was going to say, the director obviously saw The Long Good Friday and went like, "Ooh, but I like Hoskins in action." So what I will do is, on Thursday, I'll go and make the film that I want to make, which is a Bob Hoskins London-based action movie, only really up the guns, basically, isn't it? Right? And you see, and this whole completely different film suddenly starts a third of the way through this rubbish film. Yeah, completely out of nowhere, to the extent that you go, "Have I got a dodgy cut of this film and something's missing?"
Right. Yes.
And it launches, and there's this unbelievably cool, like, with Hoskins just doing it like a completely off the scale hamming like action thing, and with machine guns and grenade launchers and stuff. It's just brilliant. And then it's just a sort of device in order to introduce the character, which is completely insane and Naked Gun-ish. But I would far rather have seen that film. I would far rather have seen the shoddy Long Good Friday homage movie than this sub shoddy Harry Palmer nonsense.
When Hoskins showed up, I was like you. I thought to myself, why aren't I watching this film?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because
loads of gunfights in 80s cars in like Docklands, London. Brilliant.
Because what Hoskins proves in that sequence is one of two things. It either proves that Hoskins was so fucking good in front of a camera that even him on an off day is a joy to fucking watch. Or it proves that even when he's... No,
I refer you to When Lions Roar.
Oh, he's awful in that, really?
Oh, you didn't watch it, did you?
No, why would I have watched it? No.
Sorry, continue.
No, I'm saying, there he's trying to play Churchill. He's trying to actually play a role, so I don't know about that. But I'm just saying, or the other option is that even when he's showing up as a favour to a mate to do a cameo in a ridiculous movie, he shows up professionally and gives it the beans, you know? Because in this sequence, when I was watching it, even when Caine showed up and they were talking in the lift and everything, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, did Hoskins just save this film? Is the rest of the movie, did I forget incorrectly, but is the rest of this movie like Caine and Hopkins being a bit awesome? And then it's not, and you kind of go, ugh.
Yeah, it totally should have been Caine and Hoskins go, like, gun up and go. Because it would have been completely stupid, but so much better.
Right.
But instead, he's obviously been like, look, as I say, there's a real sense of people being parachuted in.
Because in the script,
that's the problem. The Naked Gun thing makes for laughing at it in a mocking way. It does. But if you want to take it on an even vaguely serious level, which, let's be honest, it's extremely hard to do. But if you do, I would have quite liked to have seen a properly done Harry Palmer, aged 50, getting dragged back into minutes, almost like a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy sort of a thing, but with a Harry Palmer kind of a tin. You know, Harry Palmer does Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. You know,
Caine did some later Harry Palmer films.
Yes,
right?
he did. Yeah. But all I'm saying is that this film is trying to be that film, but it's also trying to be a sort of Long Good Friday actionist film. And it's trying to be, like you say, like this weird sort of Casablanca nonsense thing thrown into it. And it's trying to be like a Basic Instinct-y kind of a thing. And it's failing really badly at all of it. Now, the only thing that I thought was weird... Well, no, the whole thing is weird. But the thing that I found quite strange about it was... We've talked on previous podcasts about Michael Caine really doesn't bother in some parts, right? Like he barely even, you know, like we were particularly talking in reference to The Island about how it's all. If you were in the cast with him in The Island, you would have been furious with him about how little he gave a shit, kind of a thing.
Right.
But he is kind of trying, isn't he? Even though the script is appalling, and he's got a body double doing half the stuff and everything, his lines and his demeanour is of someone who is at least having a go. Do you think?
Oh yeah, completely. The biggest problem with this movie is the script. And some of the it's just the script. That's the biggest problem with the movie, because and maybe Caine's ego as a producer, you know what I mean? But then we've also got Caine's ego as a producer to thank for Bob Hoskins showing up and so on. So I mean, we can't be too hard on him. But no, he is. He's genuinely sort of trying to play a character and trying to have like a bit of fun with it. It's just he's on the right side of awkward, but he's still a little awkward. It's still a little clunky around the edges.
Yeah, but he's a lot more. I mean, it's a funny thing to even.
He's a lot more engaged than he was in The Island, which blows my
it's
fucking
mind. It's a funny thing to even have to say about an actor, but it is actually relevant to Michael Caine, is to say he is awake in this film.
Right.
Like, that's the thing. If he'd have been asleep in this film, then I wouldn't have been able to watch it. I would have only got like halfway through.
But the script does just call for him to like walk around in wine bars, essentially. It's not like the script is asking him.
It was in the contract that he had to be 8 paces from, you know, a bar or beer dispensary of some description at any point in the film.
Yeah.
But he did you notice when he brought out the Michael Caine points acting?
Yeah.
And he saved that for sparring with Ian Holm. That's when he finally brought, and he's sitting down when he brings out the pointing. It's such a strange thing, that pointing, and he's got to do it every single film. And I genuinely wonder whether he sits down with the script and goes, "There, that's the pointing."
That is where I'm going to do my famous patented Michael Caine point. I'm going to do it there, and that's going to be great.
Yeah, because he does. It's every single film.
The other thing, what was the other thing I was going to say that was absolutely bonkers about the movie? The fact that anyone sat down and thought that the metaphor of frozen urine falling out of the sky and calling the movie Blue Ice was a good idea. And like that just...
Well, I don't think...
It sounds like a subpar, like is it Andrew McLean or Andrew McLean? Who writes those, like, awful... Alistair McLean. It sounds like a subpar, slightly erotic thriller version of an Alistair McLean novel.
Well, it's got the most incredibly weird beginning, and the beginning is not even, like...
About anything.
Context or explained. I mean, he's just at a funeral. And then leaves the funeral. And
then an old woman wanders up and goes...
and he talks to this old woman.
I bet you killed him. And he was like, no, he was killed by blue ice, which is something...
You think something clever's going to happen? Or like he's going to say something like, like, yes, actually, I am like a secret dangerous person. But no, he shows her a newspaper clipping that explains that, yes, this person was killed by blue ice that fell from a plane.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, right. And then suddenly he's driving around in a big flashy jacket with jazz playing, and Sean Young drives into the back of his car.
It's meant to be that Sean Young is blue ice because she falls into his...
out of a pale blue sky onto her head.
Right. But that's where the metaphor, like, ends, because she doesn't kill him. She doesn't fall out of anywhere. She actually rear-ends him with a car. It doesn't kill him. She's not urine. Like, just like nothing about the metaphor works at all. She didn't come from a plane. Like, nothing. Like, if she fell off a plane onto Caine while he was smoking a cigar,
that would have been a film.
You could go.
I think
Sean Young,
the real falling out of a pale blue sky and almost killing you is the threat of naked Michael Caine. I think that's the real blue ice.
Yeah.
that would be enough to kill you stone dead.
Because what you've just called your movie, Michael, is frozen piss. That's what you've just called your movie.
But also it is. I'm not sure we'll see another movie with where Michael Caine looks as Michael Caine as he does in this film. His fashion in this is just extraordinary. At one point, he wears a cravat. Yeah. He wears a cravat, and he's going on like he's. It makes me laugh just to think about it. He's going on to go to this hotel where there's a military intelligence guy, and he's all over. I mean, well, if I'm going to root out a military intelligence guy, it's time for the cravat. I'm going to put on the cravat now. When you're on a sleazy MI6 stakeout, it's time for the cravat.
Cravats all the way.
A little more conspicuous. Michael Caine in a cravat on the street corner.
It might as well be an army issue cravat.
And he goes to the Port of London Authority for the big end action sequence because obviously it was about to be demolished or something, which is why they charged him so little money, in a trench coat.
Right.
In the Michael Caine trench coat. He's got his silly Michael Caine hair the whole way through.
Yeah.
His jowls are flapping about for, whenever he's moving. He does look... And he's got his short leather jacket as well.
Yeah.
Almost too short leather jacket.
Yeah. Like I'm saying, I'm telling you, Michael Winner was involved somewhere along the line. Michael Winner was sat somewhere.
Now listen, Michael, what you want to do at this point is you want to go down to the docks, get the bloody stuntman to do all the work, dear boy, and we'll sit here on directors' chairs drinking cognac and champagne.
That's literally what was going on behind the scenes.
I tell you
Roger Moore went, I think I'll have another one, Michael. That's actually what was going on. In fact, I would like if Russell Mulcahy at the very end had spun the camera around and the four of them were just sat there
Yeah.
And another thing that Susan George once told me in a brothel in Stoke.
It's that kind of thing. That's what's going on behind the scenes. And I'm much more interested in that than I am in the film.
I think it would be unbelievably boring, actually, to be with those people, to be honest with you. I mean, I really think it would be. But, I think an interesting bit of trivia is that the director of this directed Derek and Clive Get the Horn. Did you know this?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, isn't that, extraordinary? That's a hell of an interesting early gig, isn't it?
Okay, let's look this up, because was Russell Moore, I know he ended up in Australia, but no, he was born in Australia, yeah, so he is Australian. So
I think they recorded it in Australia.
No, really? No.
Yeah, like when they were doing some tour out there or something. Yeah.
Dude, he did Ricochet with Denzel and John Lithgow.
I've not seen that one.
Oh, yeah, no, I just picked it up recently. I've got to rewatch Ricochet if Mulcahy did it. I'm a big fan of Mulcahy. I'll give him the time of day, because I thought Razorback and this one, and even Highlander, has its moments in terms of direction.
Yeah. I mean, saying that, I that's the thing. I'm having a pop at it because...
No, it was shockingly bad. I mean, Caine is on about 50% caring, Sean Young is on 0.5, and the script is all over the place bad.
Yeah, but it is... I can't say... because we have watched things for the podcast before where I've been like, fucking hell, end,
Right.
And I was never thinking that with this.
No.
Because... it was so weird and all over the place, and it has this really strong Naked Gun thing going on the whole way through it.
Right.
And even just looking out for the next appearance of the Michael Caine stunt double is entertainment enough when it comes to this.
I've got a feeling that maybe maybe Caine was a little in on the joke. I think he's trying to make a serious film, but at the same time, I think him and Hoskins and Winner and all those lot probably think it's a hilarious joke.
You know what?
That the movie is called Frozen Pierce.
Yeah, it's funny. I know what you mean, but the overriding impression I get of it is that if it is a joke, I think it's a sort of lazy, tedious joke, and I don't think it would be right to say the film was made as a joke. I think that he signed onto it, he produced it, he thought he could make a bit of money out of it and everything else. And I think as they were going along with it, perhaps he started to think, this might be, I don't know about this. Because, I mean, I don't know, but do you know what I mean? If it is a joke, it's a very lazy, not particularly funny one to be making, because you've got all your mates to come along and take part in this. And like you say, Bob Hoskins shows up for like 10 minutes and takes it to this completely brilliant...
He saves the film for those 10 minutes.
Yeah, for this completely brilliant action place where it's like that Long Good Friday-esque, like 80s, like grubby 80s British action thing. There is so much potential there, and so few people actually managed to do something with it.
Right.
And I just think there was a chance to, for like to start off with it, even if it had been, as all over the place, as it starts off a bit Harry Palmer and then just turns into a Michael Caine and Bob Hoskins buddy action movie, that would have been 1,000 times better.
The Brit Spendables, maybe.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And then
if Denham Elliott had been in there, like, toting an AK-47, that would have been something.
You could have had Denham Elliott, you could have had Albert Finney, you could have had, who else could have been? Roger Moore. Yeah, already this is an instantly better movie. Do you know what Blue Ice reminds me of? Blue Ice reminds me of the kind of script that Bowfinger would get and really want to make. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's got that element to it, where a producer like Bowfinger has gone, like Chubby Rain,
Yes, exactly, yeah.
The movie may as well be called Chubby Rain.
Yeah. But, like I say, I do keep coming back to, this is easily the most entertaining double bill we've done so far of Caine and Keaton for me, because The Island got that dragged for a large chunk. I mean, the whole film was a drag because Caine was so disinterested. I mean, this was really entertaining.
Yeah. And it's not, neither of them are long films. They're like, Blue Eyes keeps it to a nice lean, like 88 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Well, for them, it seemed like 1,000 years. I mean, probably it's fair to say. Apart from when Hoskins turned up, but wow, someone who gives a shit and can actually like do a performance,
Right.
But yeah, so I would say, to sum up, I would say you could do a lot worse than stick these two together to see a film that pretty much sums up the worst of Michael Caine's career and a film that pretty sums up the best of Michael Keaton's career. You can stick them together and have a nice little,
But I think Mulcahy is ultimately the person who saves this movie from being slow and annoying to watch. Because I think any other director in the seat, apart from Michael Winner, who just would have filled the thing with tits and guns and would have been appealing, but apart from that, Mulcahy at least keeps it banging along. You know what I mean? And if there is a particularly,
I don't mind it. I don't mind it. Like looking for. It's quite interesting because I bet at the time people would have been quite sneery about those bits of it which, like you say, are Phantom of the Opera or frankly, like a Duran Duran video.
Right.
But looking back on it now, I'm really quite tolerant of that, and it kind of makes it of the time for me. Do you know what I mean? I'm actually quite happy for it.
I think I've always been attracted to, if you look at the people I like, if it's Gilliam, early Raimi, directors like that, I've always been attracted to directors who are going, hello, I'm over here doing something. You know what I mean? Because as much as the actor has got to be 100% engaged and, the music's got to work and the script's got to be well written and blah, 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 the whole joy of film is also that there's people behind the scenes going, well, let's make this shot look really beautiful, or let's do something interesting with the lighting, or whatever it is, because that's all part of it. And while I understand that, like, Hollywood, mainly because they're lazy, like to have one guy holding a handheld camera and realistic lighting, waving it about a lot because that's a lot quicker way to shoot, I actually enjoy it when a director, albeit in a low-budget, ridiculous, Harry Palmer knockoff, is takes the time to go, okay, in this sequence where he finds the dead body, let's at least try and put in some, like, horror and suspense and, old school Hitchcockian tropes, which are kind of fun and just elevate the whole thing, make it all a bit theatrical and move it along. Like the bit where he's like scrabbling trying to find Alan Armstrong, his police contact's killer, on the rooftops, and the camera's like on a Dutch angle and you've got the train going by and the London sky and all that. That's like, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, we're in a movie now, you know, it feels good.
Yeah,
and then you go back to like the drab, boring shot with a TV camera, streets of London. You're like, oh, you know, I want to go back to where there's a dead body falling out the sky, because at least Mulcahy's going to crank up the nonsense. So I like directors who show that they can do something other than just pedestrian stuff. And so, no, you know, good on Mulcahy, because he makes this film, along with like Hoskins and some of the other things, but Mulcahy's the one who makes this film watchable and entertaining. You know what I mean? Because every 10 or 15 minutes you get Hoskins as an action hero, or you get a gothic Phantom of the Opera shot type scene with lightning and all the rest of it, or you get Caine being interrogated and 15 Michael Caines wandering around a jazz club, whatever.
I did like 15 Michael Caines.
Every 5 or 10 minutes you get Mulcahy or Hoskins or someone just going, come on, let's keep this thing up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, you know, all credit to him, and you know, credit to Hoskins, and even Ian Holm. Like I quite liked when he went to see Ian Holm over breakfast, and Caine was like standing and Holm was sitting, and that sequence was done pretty well. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But most of it's awful, and Sean Young should have sued them all for just breach.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the
sanity.
most. Yeah, I mean, just unbelievable like insults of a part, and it almost makes me feel sorry for her, even though she's getting paid, you know, to act and stuff, which a lot of people would like to do. I do feel sorry for her with that, because you just think like that must have just been such a depressing experience to make it. I mean, never mind, you know, the insultingly useless part. I mean, having to like thrash about with naked Michael Caine must be dramatic in anyone's book, you know. You know, but still, I keep coming back to, I was entertained.
Yes.
And as I say,
it made no sense. We didn't know what we were being entertained by, but we were entertained.
Yeah, I mean, God, it was shocking. But best of Keaton, worst of Caine. On that basis, it's a really interesting little double bill and worth doing. So before we wrap up, have you seen? I just want to make a recommendation, which is, I saw recently on BBC iPlayer. I bet it's a bugger to get hold of in the States, but there's if you ever fancy like a really good, dusty, grimy, moody, noirish cop thriller, there's a movie called Mystery Road, which is a murder mystery set in the outback with a Aboriginal guy in the lead who is absolutely brilliant. It's also got the guy from The Matrix and, you know, Lord of the Rings and all that kind of stuff in it, in quite a small supporting part. It's got Billy from Neighbours in it. It was a
it's on Amazon for $3.99 rental.
Oh, there you go. You know, you have to be, you know, I was really in the mood for a moody, you know, detective story, and it just really delivers. It's really, really good.
Well, it's something of an Aussie sort of resurgence at the moment, and I think Mad Max Fury Road is going to take it to the heights, because at the moment, you know, we started with like Wolf Creek, which was the horror movie.
So is that set in Australia? Because in which case, why didn't they get an Aussie bloke then?
Mad Max?
Yeah.
Well, because, you know, they've got first of all, Tom Hardy in his contract has to be in every other movie that's being shot at the moment. That's just fact. And I mean, I don't really know. It would be up to George Miller, wouldn't it? I mean, it looks like to me from the visuals that are coming out in the trailer that someone gave George Miller, you know, a few mil and just went, all right, give us another Mad Max movie. And every time the studio heads went, can we make it? Miller went, no.
I'm making the movie I want to make.
Because if you look at the trailer, it makes no sense, and it's utterly bonkers, and it's filled with incredible, incredible visuals. And I think the studio who's financing it, if indeed there was a studio behind it initially, I don't know if Miller made it himself and now it's being distributed by an American studio, whether there was American cash behind it. Either way, whoever the studio is, the fact that it's got Mad Max in it and the fact that it's Tom Hardy probably is enough for them to make bank on it. But
yeah.
It certainly looks like Miller isn't holding back. And what's nice about it is Australia has always been this sort of quirky little B-movie factory pumping out like bonkers little genre movies ever since the 70s. And I'm hoping that they continue to do so, because I love it.
I loved Muriel's Wedding as well. I thought Muriel's Wedding was really good.
Right.
And
you need to get on some of the... Watch, if it's on British Netflix, I don't know if it is, but if you can get a hold of a documentary called Not Quite Hollywood, which is all about the rise of the Aussie film industry in the 70s, really fascinating, really awesome, and it's where I found out about movies like Lost Weekend and Razorback and all those kind of films. It's where I found out all about them and instantly started devouring them, because they made some incredible B-movies. And I've got hold of a whole bunch of them and watched them, and they're really good. Really, really good.
Have you seen anything recently, just on the more random fringes of your viewing, that you can recommend?
To be honest, I've been so busy lately, I haven't really been able to turn over the film watching wheel as much as I would have liked, because I really wanted to bang them out this year and just get stuck into some decent movies, and I really haven't. The latest thing I saw was Run All Night. I'm just going through my list, because people can keep up with what I'm watching on Letterboxd, which is letter and then BOXD.com, and then look up the After Movie Diner. Because I'm on there, my film diary is on there, and I do try and write a couple of sentences about everything. I saw a movie called Sinners and Saints, which was a New Orleans set action film, which was a lot of fun. Sadly, almost all the films that I've watched recently have been for the podcast. It's really sad, because I'm looking down my list and they've all been podcast viewings.
I'm just looking at your list now. Yeah.
I watched the Roger Ebert documentary last night, Life Itself. I've always had a mixed feeling towards Roger Ebert, because... What are you laughing at?
Me too, yeah. But also your face.
I've just always thought he was a bit of a reactionary pillock, to be honest. But then when you find out, like, Scorsese and Herzog valued him incredibly highly, I always went, well, what is it that I'm missing? And so I watched the documentary, I think in the hope of sort of figuring out what it is that I was missing. But depressingly, the documentary goes from showing clips when he was, healthy and doing his film show, and his relationship with Siskel and just how much they bitched at each other and whatever, to then prolonged sequences of where he was before he ended his life without his jaw and this, like, flabby chin flapping about the place, which is really rather unpleasant and sort of takes away from sort of any sentiment that for me anyway, because I was just like, oh, it's this really bizarre thing to see a guy without a jaw, but the skin is still there,
Yeah.
And this half of the story tells a rather affecting and interesting side of him, which is the family man, and how he was happiest when he was working, and how, although he was a bit stubborn and a bit belligerent, he was very lovable and very So it's really odd, because you have the half of the thing which is, it's really sad he's dying of cancer, it's really sad that his body's basically giving up, because he's clearly loved immensely by his family. And then this other half where he just comes off as a bit of a flabby, pompous buffoon who, while being a very, very good writer, there's no denying that his written prose is very, it's pretentious as all hell, but it's very sort of well structured and pompous and whatever. And there is this aspect that he was covering film and film criticism for 50% of the time that film has even existed as an art form, which is sort of quite incredible. And and the fact that there won't be another Roger Ebert. I still never quite got a sense of what it is that made his critical eye so important, because he subscribes to something that I don't. And he subscribes to the opinion that if I have this opinion about something, it's right, and I should just go for the neck of anybody who disagrees with me. And he invented sort of popcorn TV criticism, because their Siskel and Ebert show was very, to my mind, very light and lacking in substance. It would basically be like, well, I like this movie, and then sort of some vague reason why they liked it. And then, well, I didn't like it because and then they would bitch about it, saying you're wrong and you're wrong. And then the show would end because it was only, 20 minutes long. And that was it. Like, there was never, to my mind, I prefer a discussion. I prefer a nice back and forth. And even if you do disagree, that you have some, like in school, you show you're working, right? So I have friends who love Man of Steel or love Superman, love Man of Steel, and I absolutely fucking hate it. But rather than just going, I hate it, I like to think that I go, I hate it because of this is the problems that I had with the film X, Y, and Z, and, show my working, show my reasoning, and then at the end of the day, let the listeners go, okay, well, I think John had a point about this, but I think, David may have had a point about that, or whatever it is. And just have a nice back and forth. He subscribes more to the sort of bulldog theory of TV or audio film criticism, and I don't know. And there was a couple of stories where he sort of championed some smaller movies that was really nice, and he did what Kermode is always talking about, which is how criticism can highlight the little films, smaller films, and art films and foreign films and forgotten films. It can shine a light on them and get them seen in more of a way than would be otherwise. And there were certainly films he did that for, which was excellent. And maybe Herzog feels like, he did that for some of his movies in America. I don't know. But, because Herzog's in the documentary for like 3 minutes and says something about when I walk down Hollywood Boulevard and I know that his star is coming up, I look at the sun. It's all this sort of nonsense. So, and Scorsese is in there to be like, he gave me a real chance at the beginning, but when I made Color of Money, he really hacked me down. But then, like, when I made another movie, he really liked it. Like, he didn't just play favorites. There's an interesting story there, but really, by the end of it, it wasn't like it changed my mind on Ebert. So that's how I felt.
Yeah. Well, cool. That sounds interesting. I to be honest, I'm more interested in the sound of Not Quite Hollywood. That sounds really good.
It's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. I think I might well give that a go, because I love a really good documentary. And actually, just when we, in the couple of hours when we came back from our friend's kid's birthday party, I had a couple of hours, and I was like, I really fancy a good documentary. I don't fancy a movie. I fancy a documentary, and couldn't find anything. So that hits the spot.
The two that I really like by that filmmaker is Not Quite Hollywood, which is all about Australia, and Machete Maidens Unleashed, which is all about the exploitation movies that were made in the Philippines by Roger Corman predominantly in the 70s and 80s. And what I liked most about them, apart from sort of seeing all the talking heads and learning some funny behind-the-scenes stories, was I want to watch that movie, I want to watch that movie, I've got to get hold of that movie, that kind of thing. It was really good like that. Rather than just watching trailers, it actually made me think, that might be quite fun. He did a third one on Canon movies called Electric Boogaloo, the Canon story, which I watched earlier this year. And I was not impressed with it, mainly because it seemed to be a bunch of talk. And it wasn't his fault, the director, but it was a bunch of people sort of slagging Canon off. And, after about 10 minutes, that got a bit tiring. And I was like, okay, but you made these movies for Canon, so at least talk about, like, why you did it and what it was that was interesting at the time and blah, 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 rather than, these two old fat Jews don't know what they're doing and they're wasting lots of money and look at them, aren't they silly, which is kind of what the documentary descended into. So, which was a real shame, because I think there is a movie to be made about either Canon or PM Entertainment, who are another double act making B action pictures in the 80s. And PM Entertainment might be even more interesting because they put all their money into stunts and explosions. They really care less about plot and who happens to be starring in it. It's all about stunts and explosions. So that might be an even more interesting documentary. But the first two he made, Machete Maidens Unleashed and Not Quite Hollywood, are really good. So check them out.
Cool, will do. But it's been, that was fun. I enjoyed talking about those. And I as I say, I really enjoyed both those movies. I have to say, I'm picking it apart, Blue Ice, because that's what we're here to do. But I enjoyed it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it, because I did. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one you pop in again necessarily.
No, or ever, yeah.
But I'm glad I revisited it because I last watched it with my dad. At home when it was on television, and I think my dad rather enjoyed it. It's sort of my dad's movie. If ever there was a movie made for my dad, it's probably this one. Anyway.
Cool. All right, Chief. I better pack up. But that was fun, man. That was cool.
Yeah, enjoyed that. And this is a track off my latest album, The Weekend album, which can be found on Spotify, iTunes, Bandcamp, Amazon, you name it. Look out for Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures, The Weekend album, available now. Well, they say no news is good news. Well, we haven't had news now for years. All we've got is the jolly and the ignorant, trying to further their million-dollar careers. Oh, yeah, well, I knew a man he moved to Indiana to open up a pet store on the outskirts of town, and his wife and children left him taking his favorite plates. Look, that man, I knew he never wore a crown. Oh, no, that man, I knew he really liked pets. Well, and I wish that I could be just like him. Oh, yeah, well, I wish that I could be just like him. Oh, yeah, I wish that I could be just like him. Yeah, I wish that I could be just like him. Well, old Binky Muffin ran a racket for the Greeks, got them free tennis equipment in exchange for food. Well, he's dead now and they still smash crockery at his graveside, and it always puts them in a good mood. Oh, yeah, it always puts them in a good mood. They hate crockery, and I wish that we could all be like them. Oh, yeah, well, I wish that we could all just be like them. Well, I wish we could all be just like them. Yeah, I wish that we could all be just like them. But the water's slowly rising and the animals are dying. We should be eating vegetables or all deep fat frying. But honestly, that tastes better, and I'll be dead long before it gets too bad. Oh, yeah. So shut up all your whining and eat a big fat cake that will never ever make you feel sad. Oh, no. Yeah, one more verse, come on now. And your lady, she had lots of hats to wear. She could never choose